Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 16 of What Makes This Song Special. By now, most of you know the format. Every week I take a song that has been one of the songs to the soundtrack of my life. I talk a wee bit about why it is special to me. I talk a wee bit about what the song makes me think of and what I remember when I hear it. I'll then talk a little bit about the singer's vocal style, and I will then follow up with a part 2 of me doing my own cover version of the song. So I'll dive into this week's story. So this week's story starts for me in the end of the summer 2001. So at this point I was still playing the sort of what we called the toilet tour with my band Vici. Lots of kind of dives and horrible venues that we played, and some nice ones as well, but many kind of not so nice ones. So the band had changed members a few times by this point, but there was still me on vocals and piano and sometimes guitar. My good school pal Gordon Hall on bass, and my right hand man Davey, the blues man Monroe, on guitar. So he was a sort of Slash to my Axl, the Brian May to my Freddie Mercury, and we were sort of inseparable at the time, living out of each other's pockets, as they say, as frontmen and guitarists often do in rock bands. And for a couple of years by this point, we'd been playing gigs, writing songs, dreaming of something bigger than what we were doing at the time. These aspirations of conquering the world, and things were starting to take off for the band. We were doing quite well with that band. We played a couple of really good gigs actually as well, and even appeared on a TV programme at the time called The Priory, which some people might remember, which was quite a big deal for us anyway. There's probably another episode about the day we recorded that, because that was a funny day, and there's a song that reminds me of that day, so we'll go there soon. But at the time I was also working part-time as a chef, dishwasher, pot monkey in a country club, whilst playing and rehearsing as much as we could with the band in our free time. And the head chef would often ask me to work like a split shift. So split shift at the time would be, you would get up super early, you'd start work at maybe 7 or 8 in the morning, you would do breakfast and lunch, finish at 2 o'clock, get 2 or 3 hours off in the afternoon, and then go back in at about 5 and work till 10 at night. So it wasn't a fun shift, but often I would take them on during the week, knowing that I might get a Friday night off or a Saturday night off to play a gig, or do something fun that you can do on weekend nights that you can't always do on weeknights. So that was where I was at the time, and actually on the day in question I'd just finished doing the morning shift, and I think it was like a 9 till 3, and then I had to be back in for 5 or 6. And what I used to do was, the country club that I worked in was awesome. It was a really nice place to work, and one of the perks was that you got a free membership in the gym. So what we would do is I'd go to the gym, do some weights, go for a swim, and a sauna, steam room, all these things that felt quite adult at like 18, 19. They certainly felt, and quite kind of probably above my pay grade at the time, like getting paid about £3 an hour, but getting to go into the gym, and at the time there were like famous footballers and things like that went there, because it was quite a kind of 5-star place to go. So it was quite a cool place to work, and you'd get to do all these nice things like steam rooms and saunas and things that back then weren't really that common. So especially if you didn't have lots of money. So then I'd go for a shower, and then sometimes I'd have time to go down to, like, there was a snooker and a pool hall, and you could go down and play some pool or whatever with pals before you went back to work. And as always on a split shift, I was heading down to the gym, and my mobile phone rang. Now, back then, when your mobile phone rang, it was always someone you knew. It was your mum, it was your brother, it was your best pal, it was your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever. But like, it basically was, somebody you knew for most people. It wasn't often, I don't think, for many people at the time, where you would see an unknown number. And I was thinking, maybe it's somebody looking for a band for a gig, or one of the pubs in town looking for a band. So I thought, well, I'll answer this. And yeah, I think I remember answering the phone and this English accent says, "Is this Rico?" And it was a strange voice, because I remember at the time I felt like it was a familiar voice, but I had no idea who it was. And he introduced himself as Steve Brown. So he then goes on to tell me that he has worked as a producer for Elton John, for George Michael, Freddie Mercury, the Manic Street Preachers, and he names like those four of my absolutely favourite artists at the time. And I immediately think, right, okay, this is a prank. I'm thinking of the prank calls that me and my mates have inflicted on others at this point, and I'm thinking, right, I'm getting pranked here. So I got kind of frosty. So I was like, I've never heard of you, in a sort of aggressive tone, thinking that I was being wound up. And then he went on to some really specific facts about those artists and also about me. And then I'm thinking, okay, maybe this isn't a hoax. And so I lightened up and listened to what he had to say. And what had happened was, around about that time, I'd been putting down session vocals for a record company in the Netherlands that then sent songs to Thailand to be released. And I recorded them in Ayrshire in Scotland. So it was very bizarre. And I'm sure that, again, there's another episode maybe for one of those stories. But the couple that set that up for me and who did the recordings in Ayrshire were called Mark and Cheryl Barnes. And he mentioned in the call that he was looking to sign Cheryl Barnes, who was a singer as well, amazing singer. And he was looking for a band to back her up. So he was full of compliments. He said he loved my voice, he loved Davey's guitar playing, he thought we had a good look. And he promised to sign us off the back of helping us launch Cheryl's career by being her backing band, and then after a year or two we would get the centre stage. So he had all these plans, and he just sort of threw them at me down the phone at a million miles an hour, and it was just a lot of information to me to sort of absorb. And I kept going back and forward in my mind as he was speaking. Is this a prank? Is he trying to rip me off? You know, all these millions of thoughts that were coming into my head while I'm listening to him tell all these stories about people who I adored, all these great artists and bands. So by the time the hour-long call was finished, obviously by that point I'm convinced it wasn't a prank. Not many people keep a prank call going for an hour. It was then too late for me to do my usual sort of mid-shift workout, and so I decided just to walk home. I only lived about 10-15 minute walk away from my work, so I walked home just to kind of gather my thoughts, have a sit down and sort of work out what I was going to respond to this guy whenever I phoned him back. So obviously immediately the first thing I did was, when I got home, I went to my CD collection. I used to have this CD collection in my room with hundreds of CDs that I'd bought, and I'd pull out Elton John, George Michael, the Manic Street Preachers, and there it was, written on all of them. All these albums that I was pulling out, it was like produced by Steve Brown, or he was in the sleeve notes as an engineer or somebody but for a few of them he was the main producer. And I'm just like, wow, okay, right, I could feel the butterflies flying around in my belly at this point. This guy was the real deal. And I remember I put on the Manic Street Preachers' first album, because he produced that whole album, so I thought, I'll have a listen to what his production's like. And that album's called Generation Terrorists, an amazing album, came out in 1991, I believe. Really cool album. And at a certain point in the album, there's a song that comes on called Damn Dog. And I'll let you hear what this goes like at the start, because at the very start of the song, this happens.
This is Damn Dog by the Manic Street Preachers. Take one. Go.
So that is Steve Brown's voice, and as soon as I heard that, I thought, oh my God, that's the voice that I was talking to on the phone. That's why I think when I answered the phone, I recognised his voice, because I'd heard that song thousands of times, and it's his voice. It's got a very specific, I can't think what accent that would be in England or what part of England that accent's from, but it's a very, very recognisable voice. And so yeah, that was Steve Brown that I'd been speaking to on the phone. So that was all the confirmation I needed at that point. It was definitely him. So I remember when I went back to work and I was telling some of the guys in work about what had happened, and they were all like, "Oh, you need to take the opportunity, do it," as people always do. And I remember when I finished my shift that night, Davey, the guitarist, came to pick me up, and he sort of screeched into the car park, shouting out of the window, "Rico's quit! Rico's quitting the job. He's not coming back. He's been signed." And obviously, he did the same call that I had, I presume, that afternoon. I think he got a call from Steve as well, and he was much less dubious about the whole thing and much less nervous about it all than I was. He was just like, "Yeah, where do I sign? Take me." So, yeah, in the following weeks, I ended up on the phone to Steve Brown probably about another 10 times or something like that. And he was a really nice guy. He seemed to want to work with us. He told me all these really cool stories about musicians that he'd worked with, and he told me he lived next door to Roger Taylor from Queen, which obviously Queen being my favourite band, I was blown away by. He told me that George Michael was best friends with his wife and was quite often round at his house for cups of tea, and his wife thought I sounded like George Michael, which I think probably at the time I maybe did a little bit. I think I'd tried to copy George Michael, but inadvertently, like in a sort of subconscious level, you try and sound, or you don't try and sound, you just end up sounding like your heroes. You can't really help but sort of emulate certain tonal qualities of the singers that you are inspired by, I suppose. So I definitely had a bit of a George Michael sound in my voice at the time. I don't think I was as good as him, but I definitely had a bit of the George Michael tone. And so she'd let George Michael hear my demo, and then George Michael had written on a wee post-it note, which I've still got. I've got it. I've got a screenshot of it from an old phone, or I've got it saved in an email on an old phone in my loft. So if I can get a charger for that phone, I'll put a wee picture of it. But it's a wee post-it note that I got from George Michael that basically said something along the lines of, "Rico, stop copying my voice. Love, George." And it was so amazing, but it's an amazing moment. I kept thinking, is this real? Is he winding me up? But then I don't know why he would, because he did know. At the time, even sort of primitive Google at the time, I remember Googling bits and pieces and stuff, and I was like, yeah, he's worked with George. He produced Club Tropicana and some of those Wham hits, and yeah, it's so it was really cool. That was a really cool moment for me as a massive George Michael fan. So yeah, if I can find it, I'll put a wee picture of it up. If I can find a charger for that old phone, and then he sent us a store card for a huge shop called the House of Fraser. It's in Glasgow. I don't know if there are any other House of Frasers anywhere else, but the House of Fraser's like a big Glasgow department store with lots of designer parts to it, like little designer outlets within the shop. And he gave us this store card and told us to go and buy some clothes for a photo shoot, buy some cool jeans and jackets and things. And I felt really guilty about it, because at the time, in my heart of hearts, I'll go into why in a minute, but like I knew I was probably going to turn this down, because that's what I do. When things come along that seem too big, I chicken out. And I felt guilty buying the stuff on the card. But the guys in the band were so excited, and they were like, "We're going on a spending spree. This guy's a millionaire, don't worry about it. Let's just go in and buy some clothes." And I remember I was obsessed with Fight Club at the time, the film Fight Club. And I managed to find this red leather jacket that looked like the one that Brad Pitt's character, Tyler Durden, wears in the film. Only to lose that jacket. I left the jacket in a studio, in a recording studio, a few weeks later, and I never saw it again. So I spent years trying to... I eventually got another one a few years ago, but unfortunately I had to pay for it myself. But yeah, we went on the spending spree, bought clothes, went and got like a photographer. A photographer came and took some pictures of us and did some photo shoots and stuff with all our new clothes on and stuff like that. And it all just seemed exciting, but also it all was going very, very fast at the time. And the whole situation was really eating at me. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about, because he'd been talking about going straight over to do some stuff in America. And I don't know, I think he was probably trying to excite us by making it sound big, but in actual fact it just put me off, because I don't know. I felt I didn't want to let the boys in the band down. You know, they were like my best pals at the time, and they were so pumped up about it. They were just so excited. And I think at the time I was saying things to them like, "Oh, I'm nobody's backing singer. I'm not going to sing backing for anybody, and we don't need this guy." And I think he's going to rip us off. And the truth was that I was just really scared of what seemed like too big an opportunity to get at the stage we were at. I just didn't think we were ready. I didn't think I was ready personally, but I didn't think we were ready even as a band. I just didn't think we'd done enough yet to then just jump on huge stages in America and start playing. So it all seemed just a wee bit scary. And probably one of the biggest factors as well was I was just in a complete honeymoon period with my then girlfriend, now wife, Lynn's, and we were just totally loved up and wanting to spend every second with each other. And I think the boys couldn't believe that I was turning this down because, you know, I had the fear of ruining things with a girl I'd been seeing for a few months. But it was one of many reasons why at the time it just didn't feel right for me. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to leave Glasgow, and he was talking about, you know, moving away for about a year or so and doing all this stuff. So yeah, in the days and weeks that followed, while I was making my mind up, and he kept, you know, he gave us lots of time to decide, and he kept sending us things, and very, very kind. And I was working in the kitchen, and the radio kept playing this song called "Let Love Be Your Energy" by Robbie Williams, and the lyrics in the chorus were just sort of convincing me that the right thing to do was to listen to my heart and stay. And in the end, I did turn it down. I turned it down. The boys in the band fell out with me. We've rekindled the friendship since, but they fell out with me for a while. For a few months, I think things were a bit frosty between us, because I think obviously without me, it couldn't happen for them as well. Which was, they kind of tried to make it work without me, but I don't think it didn't really work out in the end. So I always felt quite guilty about it, although I don't think it would have worked. I'm just going to say that here. I don't think it would have worked anyway, with me or without me. I just don't think it worked in the end. Not because I turned it down, but I did end up, the band kind of split up because of that, and I decided to go solo. And actually, very, very quickly after that, I got signed by a much smaller record label than Steve Brown, but an equally awesome opportunity for me with TRL Records in Glasgow, which was amazing. And we recorded my first album in Argyle Street, and whilst the boys were off doing the stuff with Steve Brown, so it worked out. It worked out well. But yeah, Steve Brown ended up being the real deal. That phone call that day that I thought was a hoax, it was actually him. He'd worked with Mercury, Elton John, the Manic Street Preachers, The Cult, Wham, Dire Straits, Thin Lizzy, the Sex Pistols, Alison Moyet. It's just ridiculous amount of huge artists that he had on his roster. And a little story actually within the story. So Steve Brown actually got his break by knowing Elton. He knew Elton John before they were famous, so he worked in a petrol station that Elton used to go to, and they just used to chat when Elton was in buying cigarettes or whatever. And he said that if he ever got signed, that he would love to be a roadie. And Elton said, "Oh, if I ever get signed, then I'll take you with me on the road." And when he got signed, and the day that he was moving to London, he popped into the petrol station and said to Steve, "Do you want to join me on the road crew?" So he went from being like the drum technician or the drum roadie or something like that for Elton John, and then he worked his way up to being, you know, a sort of engineer on, I think, Elton John's first album, like a co-engineer, and then worked his way up to being Mutt Lange's co-producer on the Boomtown Rats debut album, and then the producer for I Wish It Could Be Christmas by Wizzard, we all know that song, and Club Tropicana, as I said earlier on, by Wham. And then of course all the other bands that I mentioned, he became the producer for many, many albums. So, and it's an awesome story. And sadly, I got the news last year that Steve actually passed away quite suddenly, just in 2021. I hadn't spoken to him for like 20 years, but when I heard the news, I just felt really sad about it, because he did make a real mark on my life just in those couple of months that I knew him. And as always, when somebody passes away and you hear about it on Facebook, you leave a carefully worded message saying how sad you are to hear the news, and you're thinking of those close to him and things like that. And I got a wee notification from another top producer, another legend of production game called Duncan Cameron. And Duncan said in the message, "Steve thought very highly of you, Rico." And I remember like that comment kind of hit me, because I just thought, oh, that's really nice that, one, that Duncan said that, and two, that if he did think that highly of me, it was very nice to hear from somebody who's such a legend in the music business. So it took me back to that time where I was so nervous and thought he was trying to rip me off, when he was actually just a really nice guy, and a real man of his word. So yeah, so there's my wee story. That's my wee story about what this song that I'm about to do a version of in part 2 makes me think of. That's why it's special to me. When I hear that song, I always think of like that time in my life where I was not trusting people and being paranoid about the music industry, and thinking that everybody who tried to help you out in the music industry was trying to take your soul, your money, and all that stuff. So as always, I talk a wee bit about the singer. I'll keep it really short, because I know this has been a slightly longer episode than usual. So Robbie Williams, I don't think he needs much of an introduction from me. Rose to fame as one of the members of the boy band Take That. And after an extremely famous split, he pursued a solo career that I think everybody thought was going to be a failure. I think everybody thought, oh, he's going to be a boy band split up and somebody becomes a solo artist. And he proved everyone wrong by becoming one of the biggest solo artists of the late 90s and early 2000s. So hit after hit after hit, and he became this amazing sort of Mercury-esque frontman with this confidence and sort of charisma on stage that could have the crowds at any festival or stadium gig sort of eating out of the palm of his hand. So vocally, Robbie Williams he's a good singer. I think he's got a cool voice. Definitely improved a lot from the days in Take That, where I don't think he really did anything majorly difficult. Just a kind of cool voice, and did some harmonies and stuff in that band. But he developed a kind of really good pop rock anthem type vocal. I think for the type of songs that he was releasing at the time, they were all kind of big anthems with big sing-along choruses, which was great for festivals and, as I said, all the kind of stadium gigs that he did, where everybody went along and sang along. And I would say, hearing them now, I think that sometimes sort of belty, shouty nature in his singing, which obviously was part of what made his songs and his voice great at the time, has definitely taken its toll a little bit, and he gets the crowd to sing a lot of the high notes now, sort of shoves the microphone into the crowd for the choruses. But still a great character, excellent entertainer, and some great songs in his back catalogue. Obviously, Let Love Be Your Energy, the one I'm about to cover, been one of my favourites just because of the wee story. So please let me know in the notes, in the comments, what makes the song special to you. Does it remind you of anything in your life? If you're looking for vocal coaching, send me a wee message. I'll see if I can get onto Zoom or Skype and we can have a session. Please like and share the video if you like. Please watch part 2, which is going to be here. Ding! And I should make like a wee sort of sparkly star come out of my teeth when I do that with the wee noise. I'll try and do that. And yes, tune in next week for another What Makes This Song Special episode. Thank you.